Good morning. It's good to have you worshiping with us this morning. I'd like to remind you that as of today, we are now doing in-building worship service. If you do decide to come, we are requesting that everybody come for worship wear a mask. If you don't have one, we will provide one at the door for you. If you're not comfortable coming into the worship service at this time, you can come to the parking lot, and we will have a parking lot worship, and you can turn your radio onto 87.9 to join us there. And if not, for the foreseeable future, we will still continue to do this online worship for those of you who want to stay at home and be able to worship with us. At this time, I'd like to invite the praise team to lead us in worship. Thank you.
This morning, we woke up and opened our eyes to a new day, a day filled with so many possibilities. We could step into the day trusting that no matter what happens, Christ loves us with a deep and abiding love. So let's bring our praise and joy to God today as an offering of our love. Nothing can happen that will separate us from Christ's love. From Psalm 63, I have seen you in the sanctuary and beheld your power and your glory. Because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you. I will praise you as long as I live, and in your name I will lift up my hands.
We're choosing celebration, breaking into freedom. You're the song of our hearts. We cast aside our shadows, trust you with our sorrows. You're the song of our hearts. We're dancing to the rhythm of your heart. We're rising from the ashes to the stars. You're the joy, lighting my soul. The joy, making me whole. Though I'm broken, I am running into your arms of love.
This morning's text comes from John 13, verses 31 through 35. When he was gone, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will glorify the Son in himself and will glorify him at once. My children, I will be with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and just as I told the Jews, so I tell you now, where I am going, you cannot come. A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another." This is the word of God for the people of God. I mentioned last week that the author of the cartoon strip Peanuts, Charles Schulz, was a Christian who often used his cartoons to express the gospel. The story of the cartoon strip Peanuts needs to be read on two levels. One, on the human level, that is often funny, but also on the divine level, where we can read a hidden message, a coded message for our lives. And so I'd like to share a story with you this morning, and I'd like for you to listen to this on two levels, both the human level and the spiritual level. The story goes like this. Charlie Brown is speaking to Linus, and he said, I wish I could get rid of my problems that easily. I feel miserable. Nobody likes me. Charlie Brown was in love. And Linus knew it because Charlie Brown wasn't feeling very well lately. His stomach was upset. He was distracted. And Linus had seen Charlie looking over at the little red-headed girl on the school bus one day. Even more important than that, one day, Linus saw Charlie playing the daisy game. I mean, you know the daisy game. She loves me not. She loves me not. I mean, Linus figured out what was going on, and so he approached Charlie Brown, and he spoke to him bluntly. "You like the little red-headed girl, don't you, Charlie?" And Charlie was so upset. He was flabbergasted. He was embarrassed. Now another person knew that Charlie Brown was in love with a girl. Well, that same day, Charlie Brown went to school, and the teacher asked Charlie to come up front of the whole class and to read his report to all the kids in the class. And Charlie was upset by this. He was flustered and frustrated and frazzled, and he fumbled his papers around to find his report. And in his frustration, Charlie finally decided to read the first page, the top page, regardless of what it said. Charlie read aloud, "Dear little red-headed girl, do you like me?" Signed, Charlie Brown. Oh no, he had read the wrong paper. The whole class laughed at him, and there's nothing worse than having the whole class laugh at you. And so the next day was the last day of school, and Charlie couldn't go all summer without knowing if the little red-headed girl liked him. He had to know. I mean, it would be a long, long summer if he didn't know. And so what would he do? I mean, so Charlie made his plans. He would go early the next morning, and he'd get on the school bus, and he'd ask her directly if she liked him or not. And so he set his alarm clock early so as not to miss the bus. It was 4 o'clock in the morning when the alarm went off, and he felt like he'd been run over by a herd of elephants. He got up and he went to the bus stop by 4:30 in the morning, and he waited on a bench. And while he was sitting on a bench, waiting for the bus, Charlie dozed off, and then he fell asleep, only to be awakened by the roar of the bus engine at the school bus as the school bus pulled away from the bus stop. And he saw the flash of the little red-headed girl's flaming red hair in the back window of the school bus as it pulled away. And he thought, oh no, he missed the bus. He failed again. And he finally got to school, and he was late and tardy, so he had to get a slip. But he was in the same class with her all day, and suddenly the day was over, and he had one more chance left, only one. And that was the ride home on the school bus. And the school bell rang, and he shot out of school, and he stood there in line, and as the hordes of kids kept pushing and shoving and crowding around him. But he managed to squeeze onto the bus. And as he looked around, he thought, where is the little red-headed girl? And as the bus started to pull away from the curb, he looked back, and there was the little red-headed girl standing on the curb. And she's waving at him or someone on the bus. And he thought to himself, oh no, I failed again, another crushing blow. But in the confusion, he put his hands in his pocket and he felt a piece of paper that shouldn't have been there. I mean, somebody must have bumped into him and put that note in his jacket pocket. So he opened the note and it said, Dear Charlie, I like you, Charlie Brown. Signed, the little red-headed girl. And Charlie was so happy. He jumped, he danced, he clicked his heels in the air and he read the note again. I like you, Charlie Brown. And Charlie felt so good inside. And now all summer he would be happy because he knew he was liked by the little red-headed girl. After all, isn't that what life is all about? Thus ends the story about Charlie Brown and the little red-headed girl. And this classic story about life is a parable, a story that has two levels of meaning. The story is about Charlie Brown, but more importantly, we know that the story is about us. It's about you and it's about me. The story is an answer to an important question in life. Am I liked? Am I loved? Do you like me? Do you love me? I mean, so simple, so basic, so important to all of us. I mean, many of us remember the daisy game where you removed the petals from the flower and you said, she loves me not. She loves me not. I mean, is there any adult who didn't play that game as a child? Am I loved? Am I not? Am I liked? Am I not? Do you like me? Do you love me? Do you respect me? And in the game of life, you come to the conclusion that if you are liked or loved or admired by a person, you click up your heels and you dance because you know that you are loved. But on the other hand, if you know that you're not liked or loved or appreciated by that important person or persons, you don't feel like dancing. So Jesus said, a new commandment I give you, that you love one another as I have loved you. Thereby fulfilling the law, thereby fulfilling the fundamental need found in the other person in yourself. The need of all human beings is to know that we are liked and loved and appreciated. Jesus said, love one another. I mean, we as human beings have many needs in life. We humans have fundamental needs that have to be met in order for us to survive. We have these very basic needs of air and water and food and shelter. But I would like to suggest to you this morning that we have another fundamental need, and that need is to experience love, to experience God's love, the need to receive love, and the need to give love. The need is for the quality of love, God's love, Jesus' love, the love of the cross. Not love from the movies, the comic strips, or the malls. We all have a need to experience genuine love. That is to receive love and to give love. And it's always in that sequence. To first receive love and then to give love. You can't give what you first haven't received. This need to experience love, to receive and give love is as necessary as air and food and shelter. I mean, you can't survive as a human being without water, air, food, and shelter. Likewise, we as human beings cannot survive nor reach our full potential unless we experience love, to give and to receive love. I mean, yes, you can survive with less. You can survive on a lot less and still be human. You can survive on having a minimum diet and having a minimum physiological needs met. You can meet your minimum social needs, your minimum work needs. You can survive on minimum, but you will never reach your full potential as human beings unless you receive and experience love. God's love. Receiving love and giving love. Now, let me explain. For example, if you have an apple tree at your house, and all it does is produce beautiful apple blossoms, is that tree fulfilling its full potential? Obviously not. The apple blossoms smell good, but is the tree meeting its full potential? No. And second example, let's say you have a tomato plant, and this beautiful tomato plant grows bushier and bushier and thicker and thicker and leafier and greener, and this plant grows to be the bushiest, leafiest, greenest plant that you have ever seen. But it doesn't produce any tomatoes. Would you say that this particular tomato plant was fulfilling its full potential? I mean, how about a meadowlark? Let's say that you see a meadowlark fly and do all kinds of aerobatic tricks in the air and fly the highest that a bird can fly, but the meadowlark never sings. Would the meadowlark be realizing its full potential? Of course not. I mean, just as the meadowlark was designed by God to sing beautiful songs, and just as the apple tree was designed by God to make luscious, sumptuous apples, and just as the tomato plant was designed by God to produce big red tomatoes, so you and I have also been designed by God to love, to experience love, to receive love, to give love. I mean, that is our God-given design. That is the way that God made us. I mean, we are made in the image of God. And we have been designed to love. And it's only when we reach our full potential as human beings, only when we experience love, giving and receiving love, do we become fully human. I mean, you can settle for less in your life, but your life won't be very good nor very fulfilling. And you'd be like apple trees with only blossoms and not apples. A tomato plant with only leaves and not tomatoes. A meadowlark who only flies and never sings. God has made you to love. And only in loving and experiencing love and receiving and giving love do you find your true self. Do you find your true potential and true humanity? And so what is love? Well, love is not easy to define. I mean, can you capture the waves of an ocean in a fishing net? No. Can you capture a beautiful butterfly by dissecting its wings? No. Can you capture love by writing a poem about it? I mean, Shakespeare wrote 150 sonnets trying to capture love, and after 150 sonnets later, he could not define it. I mean, there are some things in life that are so mysterious and so big that you cannot capture them even in words. And that's the way that love is. Love is so big. Love is so mysterious that you cannot capture it in words. But when you see it, you know it. I see it all around me every day of the week. I see it in Lisa's eyes and face whenever she comes through the door after a long day of work. I see love all the time. I've seen it time and again in the way that you have shown your support and your concern for my family and I these past 5 years. I see it in those of you who have devoted your time monthly and some of you weekly to work at the local food pantry. I see it in our concession stand ministry as this congregation invests countless hours in raising money to be dispersed to various mission projects. I see it in our prayer life and genuine concern for the health and well-being of our members. I see it all the time, but I still cannot define it, nor have any of the poets of life. But I know it when I see it. That's the way love is. Fleeting, mysterious, incomprehensible, elusive when you try to define it, but love is a reality. Love is a fact of life. Love is a way of life. To experience love, to receive and give love, is to have the Spirit of Christ's love inside of you. Where you say, I will forgive you no matter what. Where you say, I will love you no matter what. Where you say, I will be gentle with you no matter what. I will be with you no matter what. I mean, Jesus accepted people just the way they were, but He never left people just the way they were because He loved them. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, the Roman Catholic theologian, once wrote, sometimes, after the mastery of the winds and the waves and the tides, after the mastery of the sun and the sea and the laws of gravity, we shall harness for God the energies of love. And when we harness the energies of love for the second time in human history, we shall discover fire. I mean, think about it. What if we harnessed atomic fusion? I mean, wow. What if we harness the energies of love? The world would be transformed. And this is the kind of love that I'm talking about. It's not some impossible ideal. It's not some form of idealistic behavior that is confined to Disneyland or Fantasyland or Fairyland. I see it in the lives of people in our church. Now, I hate to admit it, but I have to admit that I do not see any ideal families today. I see no ideal husbands, no ideal wives, no ideal children, no ideal pastors. I see no ideal anyone. But what I see here today is a bunch of real people with real struggles and with real problems. In this real congregation, I see love lived out. And I know it when I see it. I see it. I see this kind of quality of love in so many of you, and this quality of love says, I will love you no matter what. I will forgive you no matter what. I will take care of you no matter what. My life is yours. I see that again and again in this congregation. Do you know the length of the longest sermon that was ever preached? The Guinness Book of World Records keeps records of everything, including the length of the longest sermon ever preached. And so how long was that sermon? 60 hours and 31 minutes by a Unitarian preacher. And some of you may think that my sermons are long. How about 60 and a half hours? But there's another world record. What was the shortest sermon ever preached? It was by Reverend John Albright, an Episcopalian priest from Lake Orion, Michigan. And he spoke the shortest sermon ever given on record. He uttered one word: love. And then he sat down. That was it. No more. And some parishioners said it was the best sermon that he ever gave. We are called to love as Christ loves. One day, Charlie fell in love with the little red-headed girl. He fell in love with the little red-headed girl, and he didn't know whether she liked him or not. And he was trying desperately to find out if she liked him. He went to so many subtle and not so subtle extremes to find out whether he was liked or not. Whether or not he was loved. And on the last day of school, he missed the bus. He was downhearted, down in the mouth, so sad. And Charlie, in his grief, looked into his hand and he discovered a note that said, "I like you, Charlie Brown." Signed, the little red-headed girl. And Charlie jumped into the air and he danced and he clicked his heels. For that is the way life is when you know that you are loved. When you know that you are genuinely appreciated. When you know that you are deeply liked. You begin to find yourself, your true self, and your true identity. I mean, what would ever happen if you personally discovered and harnessed not the power of the wind and the waves, the sun and the seas, but you harnessed the power of love in your life? Then you, for a second time, would discover fire. Let us pray. Holy God, may we hear your voice in the stillness of night, in the clatter of day. You call us and we respond, here I am. May we follow you and may we love as you love. Holy One, through trials and turbulence, make us steady, your hands holding strong the fragile and weak. May we love as you love. Gracious God, may the fruits of our lives be food for the hungry, bread, clothing, shelter, fire, water, and word. May we love as you love. God of justice, remove the barriers of our lives that keep us from one another. Barriers that we construct based on skin color, religion, or gender. May we hear and follow graciously. May we love as you love. Loving God, take this day, our fears, our worries, and distractions, and all, turn them into grace and mercy. And following the example of Martin Luther King Jr. and all your saints, may we love as you love. Amen.
What a friend we have in Jesus, all our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. Oh, what peace we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear. All because we do not carry everything to God in prayer. Have we trials and temptations? Is there trouble anywhere? We should never be discouraged. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Can we find a friend so faithful who will all our sorrows share? Jesus knows our every weakness. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Are we weak and heavy laden, cumbered with the load of care? Precious Savior, still our refuge. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Do thy friends despise, forsake thee? Take it to the Lord in prayer. In his arms he'll take and shield thee. Thou wilt find a solace there.
For the last few weeks, we've been talking about some of the divisiveness that's happening within our country. And as I think about it a lot, I think one of the main issues that I have in my life is the fact that we have social media. And social media allows people to get things out there that they normally wouldn't say face to face with people. And sometimes you read things on social media and you try to figure out exactly what in the world was that person thinking when they posted that. And as I thought about this, I thought about not only the message that we heard this morning about Christ calling us to love one another, but I also thought about the 3 simple rules that Charles Wesley laid out for us as the church started up. And the first one of those rules was to do no harm. And so I've thought about it over the years, and every time I feel like I want to say something or I want to lay something out there on social media or I want to send out an email to somebody, I ask myself, is this going to be helpful or is this going to be harmful or hurtful? And I think about the first rule, do no harm. And so it drives the way that I decide how I'm going to communicate with others. And with social media, it can be an instrument of love and reconciliation, or it can be an instrument of hate and divisiveness. It's up to us to decide. But when we think about it, and truly think about it, as Christians, we only have one direction we can decide on. And that direction is to love one another. And so if we let do no harm and Christ's command for us to love one another, it should help drive the way we communicate with one another. It should help drive the way we not only communicate, but the way we begin to understand one another and how we can love one another in the context of our own worlds. And so we need to ask ourselves in these troubled times, how is it that we are going to represent Christ to the world? How is it that we as individuals and as a church are we going to be able to open up some dialogue so we begin to understand what it is that we have been called to do in order to be the people in the church that Christ has called us to be? And so we've all heard of the movement in the past of what would Jesus do? And that's not always an easy thing to answer because there were times when Jesus was angry and he turned over the tables in the temple. But he loved everyone he came into contact with. And his message was one of love and reconciliation. His message was one of trying to figure out how we can begin to understand one another and to live with one another. And so before you send out that next tweet or before you send out that next email or before you open your mouth sometimes in the midst of a debate, maybe it would be important for us to ask, is this something that Jesus would send out? Is this something that Jesus would say to those that he loves? And I think when we allow that to drive our communication and allow it to drive the way we behave ourselves and respond to the situations that happen in life, then I think it would make the world a different place. And when we begin to learn how to love one another, then and only then can we become the instruments of change that we've been called to be. And then and only then can we begin to transform the world the way that Christ wants the world to be transformed. So go now in God's peace. Amen.